And I manifested in that state of I'm broken until I turned 40, which, okay, but you started the business, Betsy, before you were 40. Yes, I did. But I still thought I was broken. I didn't know that I could ever fix myself. And so that energy, I was carrying that energy with me. And people ask, like, why build a business if your life is falling apart? Well, building a business gave me a purpose and gave me a foundation, because when things started going well in the business, then I was able to like take that step back and be like, oh yeah, let's look at this from a new perspective. Are you ready to bust through your fears, connect to your purpose, and take inspired action to build a business that fuels your soul and your bank account? Welcome to Luscious Hustle, the podcast for soulful entrepreneurs. I'm Betsy Milne.
And I'm Laura Milne. We're transformational brand and business coaches, bringing you the tools, ideas, and motivation you need to propel your side hustle from a spark of an idea to a full-fledged, lucrative business and luscious life.
Tune in each week as we teach you our unique blend of spiritual practices mixed with savvy business strategy to help you scale and grow your brand with ease.
Thanks for joining us today. Now let's get started. So this is a conversation that I feel like always comes up between Zach and I, because how do I say this? My youth was not misspent. Like that sort of classic,
Please elaborate.
a misspent youth or whatever. Like I was the teenager who didn't get in trouble. You know what I mean? I didn't break the rules. I didn't color outside the lines. I went out, I had lots of friends and I, did things and I had fun. But like, I look back on myself as a teenager, I'm like, wow, I was so hyper controlled. And Zach is probably the polar opposite. There's nothing that kid there's nothing he didn't do. Like he moved out when he was 15 and lived on his own. And like he's lived so many multiple lives and done all the things. And so it's always so interesting to like compare and contrast, because he's only like 4 years older than me. And, it's like, okay, well, when you were at this age, where were you in life or what were you doing? The back and forth. And, I've often wondered like why I am that way. I think is largely part of I think some of it is my makeup. I think a lot of it though is like my family. And, you and I have this is something that you and I have dug into a little bit, because you and I both got really sick as babies. Like you almost died when you were 6 months old.
Yep.
And I almost died when I was 2. And this is said with love. Now, my parents, obviously that terrified them, as no doubt it terrified your parents. It terrifies any parents. As a pediatric nurse, I know that is literally the worst thing. It's actually more terrifying to look at the parents when their kids are really sick than to look at the kids.
Yeah. Oh, my mom's still traumatized by it.
Yeah, so is mine. In fact, I don't really think she's ever dealt with it. But that's something I've always pondered a lot over the years. It's like, did I play it safe subconsciously or consciously or both? Plus, I had parents that were loving, but they were the original helicopter parents, let's be real. And so there was that influence. But then I also, I sometimes I look at kids, because again, being a pediatric nurse, you see kids who are very sick. I've worked with the ones who know that they're dying and then die. And there's a type of sometimes it comes across as wisdom, but sometimes it just comes across as just really seriousness. And I think that happens when you're young and you go through something. And even if, as a 2-year-old, that wasn't something, I don't really consciously remember it. You wouldn't have remembered being sick as a baby. And yet, I have always felt this about myself, that I took this level of seriousness and carried it with me forward. And I think that shaped how I lived my life and the types of quote unquote risks I did or more likely did not take in my teens and my early 20s. And I guess where, kind of where I'm going with this is you and I have talked about this, I think it shapes how we vision cast. I think it shapes how we look into the future. And, you and I have been very different about this all along. See, I got super sick, but then I got very, very healthy again. And I've been very well since. And I've always had this ability to vision cast and to look into the future, even when life in the present moment felt very shitty. the last 2 years where I went through, a very difficult separation and um, a huge sort of like feminine rising, depression, anxiety, like walked through all of it. It's like that wobble in my energy that happened. Um, wobble's putting it lightly, but what happened to my energy, like it shook my ability to future cast. And it's so interesting to have been someone who was able to vision cast really well and then had this like massive schism for about 2 years in the middle of her life. And now I feel like I'm back on the other side of that, and I can see into the future again. And it's very interesting, but it's been so insightful in terms of how I approach looking at the future, taking ownership of my present circumstances, and also kind of like how I play things full out, how I have fun. I see now with so much clarity in my youth how I subconsciously held myself back, and it's like, why? And as soon as you step into that, like, well, why not? That
Hmm.
question takes on a whole different flavor in terms of what you're willing to play at and do in your work, in your business. Like, how risky are you willing to be? And it makes it feel not so risky anymore. That's the shift that's happened for me. Is like I just feel like the risk doesn't. I don't feel like I don't have anything to prove, and there's just I can go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation because, we teach intention setting, like lunar intention setting and Moon Goddess Foundations. And I think that the reason that Moon Goddess Foundations works and the reason that the way that we use the lunar cycle works so well is because we are marrying the masculine and feminine. There's a duality because there's always that like deep rooted feminine intention behind the goal, right? And as you go through Moon Goddess Foundations, you really learn how to distinguish between the intention and the goal. And the reason that this is so important is in human design, the bottom right variable around your head is your perspective arrow. It's also your manifesting arrow. And you and I are opposites, right?
Hmm.
So I'm very specific. I can, say something and it just comes to fruition basically. Or there's the right facing arrow, which is more about being non-specific. It's about the feeling, it's about the motion. It's more feminine, right? If it's right facing. And what's interesting being in business with you, it's like, even though I'm specific, I am way more of a risk taker than you are. Like, I'm always like, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, you
Yeah.
will think things through, and I appreciate that about you so much. And there's like dollars and cents, and I'm like, dude, let's go. Come on. And we've done one of the things in my Gallup, strength finder test that I did years and years and years ago. I have a very high risk tolerance. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm always right, but like I have no problem taking risks. I think it's why, it's funny because I'm listening to you. I was also like you, like I never wanted to get in trouble when I was little. And I mean, to this day, I still cross the street at crosswalks, but I was the girl that would like follow all the rules and then dance on the bar like at night, not drinking because I wasn't drinking it. I would still dance on the bar and all my friends were drunk and I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like I'm sober and I'll dance on the bar. My favorite New Year's, I rang in like swinging on a bar on a swing, very like Coyote Ugly. So like, there's two sides to this. So one, there's always been this sort of duality within me and I recognize that. I think that's why I love the lunar cycle. It's why I love this conversation around masculine and feminine in business. And to me, the risks are worth taking. My experience has been a little bit different than yours, though, because, I mean, it's not like once that I've been told that I was in trouble. I mean, I've been told multiple times that I'm in trouble with my body and, like, mono for 9 months. I've had pericarditis. That was, like, a big one. I thought I was having a heart attack for 2 days. Kidney infections, like you name it, the headaches, the constant headaches. I mean, that's enough to really draw anybody into a tizzy and make you question life. But it's fascinating that we're having this conversation because I've said it a couple of times. And being a self-projected projector, like this is the thing I love about human design because it starts showing up in ways when you're open to receiving it in very like weird sort of ways. And I've said on the podcast, like if I had stayed in New York, I would have died. I truly believe that. Like, I think I was like a day away from having a stroke or an aneurysm or something. And that would have been that. And the thing that's been interesting over the last 6 months, because I get this question a lot, like, we teach our clients 90-day sprints. I work really well within the 90-day sprint model. I find that 90 days is a really solid place for me to be. But as a specific manifestor, I get this question all the time, like, how do you manifest the future? Also being a projector, we're supposed to wait for invitations. So waiting for big invitations, like relationships. Like I'm not on a dating app. Somebody came to me the other day like, oh, what dating apps are you on? I'm like, none. Not doing it. Had a really shit experience, but like it's just not where my head goes. Like I it's about energetics, blah blah blah, whatever. That's a conversation for another day. But like even moving, like where do I want to be? Where do I want to go? Oddly enough, as someone who's so specific, I end up exactly where I'm supposed to be and exactly in the energy that I want to be in. But I'm not someone that's really good at vision casting into the future. Like if you ask me where I want to be 5 years from now, I honestly can't. I'm starting to be able to see it. But what I've realized recently is I said it out loud, and as a self-projected projector, I know that this is my truth. And I think I said it like 3 times before it really hit me like a ton of bricks. But I didn't think I would live past the age of 40. Like I really, truly like never thought that I would live past 40. And so I think a lot of where my mindset was so we started Luscious Hustle when I was 38. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of where my mind was, it was like, well, what do I have to lose at this point? Because I don't really think, like I never thought 4 years later we'd still be recording podcasts every week and like, we'd have this incredible business and we'd be working. I honestly, I'm not really sure that I believed in that future vision at that point. It was kind of like, it's where I want to be right now. And, 6 months from now, this would be fun. And so when it comes to manifesting, it really raises an interesting question because it points out, not even a question, but it points out the differences in all of us, right? What works for one person, like you're really great at manifesting homes and like being clear on the energy. And me, I'm like, yeah, I want a new computer. And then the new computer shows up. Like that's very, very literal in the moment. But the biggest shift for me, I think over the last couple of years is like, well, one, I got past that mindset. Like I created a hurdle for myself, 40. I created that hurdle and then I crossed the threshold and it was like, oh, everything's okay. And I think I took a year to like look around and be like, yep, everything's okay. And then I started looking to the future. But I also think, recognizing that the practice of manifesting, actually like being cognizant and mindful of how I'm manifesting has opened me back up to looking to the future. And I think everybody has a moment in their life where shit gets cloudy. I think circumstances around us make us really question everything and anything that's going on in our lives. And that's okay. I think that's part of the process, but it doesn't mean that that's the space that you're going to live in forever. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if you're listening to this and you're struggling to manifest or struggling to know how to manifest or whatever, really being kind to yourself and just giving yourself a beat and not just drilling down in what you need, but like taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and noticing where the blocks are. That's how I shifted out of it because I was really aware, like, do you know I never think past 6 months? like, oh, okay, Betsy. Like, you really never really think about anything because, there was a lot of loss along the way to get here.
Well, it's funny. Like I'm so the opposite. I'm almost too much the opposite. Like you're too much in the present or you were too much in the present and I was too much in the future. Like everything became someday and you were like, no, yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I think, but that makes sense though, right? Like, because you like the feeling, right? Like, it's so funny how this energetics conversation has evolved for us over time. Because at the beginning, it was just like, I need the energy to show up in our business. So let's talk about energetics, right? But what we've learned over time and as we've studied human design, it's like energetics play into every single thing that we do. So like you looking to the future and being a non-specific manifestor, it makes sense that you would be waiting for someday because that feeling, you're chasing a feeling, right? It's not so much the external, but there's like a feeling. And when I have that external, because you didn't know any better at the time, when I have that external, then I'm going to feel this way. What we have learned over time though, is that the external didn't always give you the feeling that you were looking for, even though it was exactly what you asked for. And I think the same thing happens with specific manifestors. Like, how many times did I beat the drum and get hard on myself because it's like, I want a 5K month, right? Like the whole first year, I want a 5K month. It was like so stupid, but I was chasing something that I wasn't actually energetically aligned with. And so what I was doing is I was like, in that weird way, was as a specific manifestor, I was also creating my someday. So I wasn't chasing a feeling. I was chasing like an external, a specific. And I think, you know, where the energetics of manifestation and the energetics of building a business become exciting to me, it's like, okay, like let's peel back the layer, not judge ourselves. I still can't tell you where I want to be in 5 years. People ask me that all the time. I'm like, I can tell you 90 days from now, I'm going to California in 2 months. You know, like, I don't know. What trips do you want to take next year? I have no fucking clue. Like, invite me on a trip and let me say yes or no. But I know that I will travel. So it's like, it's interesting how we get so caught up on the details that sometimes we lose sight of the big picture. Whereas I'm like, yeah, okay, I want to travel. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to have this. I want to have that. And then it's like, I now let go of that, the wheel. And I'm like, okay, let's see what comes this way. And the more in alignment I am, the more comes my way. And it's the same thing for you. I think you understand the feeling that you're chasing or the energy, but you can also create that energy in the present moment. And then more stuff starts coming to you.
Yeah. So the thing that comes up when you're saying that is like, in some ways, it's the same in the sense that like you before you were very in the present and you didn't project into the future, and it's somewhat still the same now, except it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's like it's a 180 in the energetics, because before it was from a place of victimhood. It was from a place of, well, I'm going to die when I'm 40 anyways, so I guess I better get going today, right? And then it's like you stepped through and like embraced your projectorness, embraced like your health journey. You rewrote a lot of stories about, like we did when we did the podcast about your migraines. It's like you kind of got sick enough of your own stories and you rewrote them.
Yeah.
And so it's like now, you know, and we often, like, we hear this from other projectors too, where people will say like, oh, projectors are always so burnt out, or we're so open. And like, yes, you are open, but that doesn't have to be, it's not a punishment. You're not a victim because your body's very open, you know, or, you know, people will prey on projectors, or projectors get treated like generators. Yes, all of that's true, but it's like you get to shift the narrative and the story around that. And like, that's the evolution. It's like it makes it okay that you don't vision cast the way that maybe others do.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I'm getting tired of the word victim because I feel like it is a triggering word, not in a good way. But the interesting thing is, it's not like I woke up one day and was like, you're not going to make it past 40. But there was just this, like, I don't know. It wasn't like a thought that came. It's only been in the last couple of months. I've said it like 3 or 4 times and I'm like, oh yeah, I never really thought that. Like, I never thought I'd get past 40. And the reason why is I had everything in the world going for me. Like, literally, I had the career that I wanted. I had the job that I wanted. I was in a relationship at the time that I thought I wanted. And I was, you know, everything was going the right way. And then I got diagnosed with PTSD. And as brains work, right? I had buried the trauma so deep inside me that my brain was like, yep, everything's working for you, but you're not fully expressed right now. So we're going to like bring this up, and you're going to have night terrors for a month, and you're going to relive everything that happened to you in your sleep. And then you're going to go get therapy, and it's going to all fucking unravel in front of your eyes. And so when I look back at my 30s, you know, like everyone always talks about how their 30s are great, and mine were fantastic. Like, I had massive milestones that I hit. I was in all the places that I wanted to be. I was traveling. I was like, on paper, everything that I specifically asked for, I got. So this is what like specific manifestors, like everything I asked for, I got. However, I also got a lot of other things that happened. I had, you know, cheating boyfriends. I had, you know, the PTSD. I like had trust issues. It wasn't that I didn't trust other people around me. I didn't trust myself to be able to show up. Like, I can see that now. And the way that my body manifested after a while, it was like, you know, the burnout wasn't just because of work. The burnout was because of all the emotional stuff that was being churned up underneath. And you know this, if you're going through something that's really terrible, and like, trust me, PTSD, when you're afraid to walk down the street and you're having panic attacks and like you're worried about meetings, I somehow was able to get myself, because I was in such deep survival mode through work, but I was still manifesting in that state. And I was still saying like, yeah, I want this. I want that. I wanted to get out of New York City. And my mom 3 times said, you should just move home, just take a month off, like whatever, we'll support you. And I remember thinking, no, I want to be like, I want to be in a spa in Arizona, or like, and then I got to the point where I was like, somebody needs to commit me so that I will stop this. Like, I knew how bad it was, but I was like, just commit me. It will be fine. So I committed myself to moving home to my parents, which at the time I felt like so much shame. I felt like such a failure. Like, if we ever unpack that story, I mean, I could probably make you cry with how bad that was when that happened. But like, again, it was like I was still manifesting in that state of I'm broken. And I manifested in that state of I'm broken until I turned 40, which, okay, but you started the business, Betsy, before you were 40. Yes, I did. But I still thought I was broken. I didn't know that I could ever fix myself. And so that energy, I was carrying that energy with me. And people ask, like, why build a business if your life is falling apart? Well, building a business gave me a purpose and gave me a foundation, because when things started going well in the business, then I was able to like take that step back and be like, oh yeah, let's look at this from a new perspective. And so I think that that's the dance of life, right? It's like, there's always going to be things happening in your life. There's always going to be multiple levels and multiple layers that you're trying to navigate. But understanding, like, if you're a specific manifester, I always got what I asked for. Maybe not in the package that I expected it to come in, but it was like, everything, I hate saying this term, everything happens for a reason, because I feel like that is, like the poster for spiritual bypassing, right? Like, we don't have to take ownership, but I did take ownership. And I was able to like look at things compassionately. That's the feminine. Divine feminine can be compassionate and nurturing without overgiving or falling into victimhood. And that's when things started to manifest in a new way for us and together. And also recognizing that you and I don't manifest in the same way. That was one of the massive shifts that happened.
Yeah, it was.
For
It really
us.
was. It is totally different for me. If you're a non-specific manifester, trying to focus on something really specific is like the kiss of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll just turn yourself around in circles. Um, I think the interesting thing too, that's like the other nugget in that is like, and you already said it, it's like people ask like, how do I manifest? How I manifest? And it's like, no, you're already manifesting.
Yeah.
We're all doing it all day long. Everything that you have in your present reality and your entire history and experiences, like, I know it's hard to hear, but like that's a manifestation. That was the reality you lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're already doing it. It's just, can you bring awareness and attention to the fact that you did that and it happened for you, and now you have there's like, it's not just like a fork in the road, it's like there's multiple forks in the road. You could choose any narrative, any reality that you want to live moving forward, and start making one decision after another, then the next, one step, and you'll pivot yourself into a different reality. It's like that frequency line will just go up, and like, now we're on this plane.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't know, I think that's so exciting to like, that gets me excited just to even visualize in my mind. It's like, yeah, I can just really sink deeply as a non-specific manifester into like, how do I want to feel? Like, how can I bring that intentionality to my life right now and trust that it's just like every decision I'm making is getting me there. But it's, you'll realize it though in the retrospect. It's like we talked about in like the previous episodes, like you don't know how you made the 7-figure businesses until after even after you'd done it, you didn't know how you did it.
Yeah.
And it's,
well, the invitation there is like, you can spend your time and energy and try and figure out how, or you can trust that when you need to know, it's going to be there. Like, the information will be there for you to tap into. And I think that's another hard thing. It's like we want SOPs, standard operating procedures, and we want to be able to duplicate, and we want to be able to scale, and we want to be able to grow. And like, yes, all those words are really juicy. And when you're starting a business and you're feeling burned out, you're like, yes, I just want to rinse and repeat. But how good does it feel to rinse and repeat? Like, clothes fade if you wash them too many times. They just do. Like, my favorite jeans, like, I'm about to lose them because I'm afraid if I sit, I'm going to like split the pants because I've worn them so much. Right?
Well, I mean, this is such a deeper conversation, really, in human design, because there's so many different ways to look at this through the human design lens. Like thinking about our motivation. We
Mm-hmm.
have a motivation, we have a transferred motivation. You can manifest through your transferred motivation, but it's a game of depletion,
Yeah.
right? It's like what's the word? Depreciation. Thank you. There we go.
Yes.
That's
Better
what I
word.
wanted. It's a depreciation game when you're working through your transfer motivation. And I actually think too, I've thought this a lot when we teach motivation and transferred motivation in the playground, but I've also thought about it a lot in terms of our generator and manage-gen clients,
Mm-hmm.
because they have as much conditioning around their sacrals and like when is enough as projectors, manifestors, and reflectors. And I think the thing is, like, we see this so often in businesses where you get in this habit of you just keep doing the thing because it worked the first time. And so you did that. You're like, okay, I'm going to launch this thing. I have to launch. I need to launch because I need the money. And so you do the launch the first time and you've success. And then you're like, okay, that worked. Oh, I need more money. Okay, let's do it. Rinse and repeat. And you do it again. But over time, if you keep grinding at that same thing, whether you're doing it because you're a Gen who's burnt out and can't, or you've lost that spark of desire, or you're a Manny Gen and you're just afraid to pivot, or you're a non-energy being and you've been riding somebody else's sacral energy for a while and not knowing when to stop yourself. I mean, or whether it's like from the motivation perspective of human design, you're working in a transferred motivation over time, whatever it is, that thing that you keep trying to do in your business, the launch cycle, the email thing, the like get more followers for getting more followers and get them into your Facebook group, whatever game it is, it, it's a law of depletion there. You'll keep doing it and it will just produce less and less satisfying results over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really such, like, when I see that, when I hear other women talking about that happening in their business, or, I can sense it happening, it's like, first of all, just know it's so natural, and it's what happens in the masculine when you keep trying to churn at it. I just feel like that, like there's like a crank in my head. It's just like going over and over, but the more you spin it, the like noisier and louder and harder it gets.
Yeah.
And you know, there's such an invitation there to shift into the feminine energy of doing things, of giving yourself that freedom to step away from, like, I don't have to know how to do this. I don't have to keep doing things the same way. I can step into, you know, really that what we talked about again on that last episode. It's like, that beginner's mindset and like really tapping into your own unique creativity. I mean, if you're going to keep working at your business, I mean, manifest one that you really, really love. Manifest one that you really, really want. Give yourself that permission to, quote unquote, risk it. I mean, is it really a risk even then? Is it
Mm-hmm.
really a risk to just, like, is it worth it to feel heavy in your work? Is it worth it to feel burnt out in your work, whether you're getting the results or not? And, it's so inspiring to me, because like that's what happened in our business. That's what pushed the change, is like we recognize where we were grinding,
Yeah.
and like to really release the rules. And when I see other women, when it happening with our clients, and I see this happening with other women, where they're starting, that pivot is happening, they're like, okay, I'm just gonna let go of this old way of doing things and really lean in and trust that I can do it a new way. um or I can manifest the way I'm manifesting, but get closer in alignment to what I want. Like, there's so much goodness in that. There's so much freedom in that.
So it's really interesting. Thank you for bringing up this motivation and the transferred motivation thing, because actually, tying into the last conversation, the reason at the end in New York that I really was in my transferred motivation, I can totally clearly see it now. I've never actually thought about this, but my motivation based on my human design is really about leadership. Like, the minute that I start hiding, or the minute that I stop leading myself and I'm like, just tell me what to do, like, I am totally working from my transferred motivation. It's funny because when Dave said to me last night, like, you and I, we always wanted to be in the background. And I was like, what? Like, but at the end, when I was in that relationship with him, that is very true. Like, I did not want to be the one in charge, because I was just so burned out, but I was still having success letting other people sort of steer the ship. And it was like, as soon as somebody else started steering the ship, I wasn't doing as well, and I started getting burned out. And yeah, this idea of like depletion, I mean, it's real. But it's also, so society accepts that, like depletion is part of the process, right? Like it's like a marker that you're working hard, even though you don't have results, like you're working hard. But it's so interesting that you bring that up today, because yeah, when Dave said that to me last night, I was like, like it just that sentence, it was so true. At that point in time in my life, I did not want to be seen. I did not want to be heard. I did not want to be the one in charge, because I felt just so like broken and out of place. But that's growth, right? Like we have to go through those moments. And never really thought about that before, but it makes total sense. And then it makes total sense why it didn't work out with him. I was not being myself, right? Like at all. And two wrongs don't make a right. So there we go.
Oh my God. Well, okay, but isn't this funny though? Because this is exactly like, this is where human design just like this is all the fun that gets had in the playground, because you learn all of these foundational and next level elements of how your human body, your energetic body works. And then it's like, as you're peeling back the layers of what's happened in your life, what's happening in your life presently, and then where you're stepping into in the future, it's like it puts everything through a whole new filter. And like it just is radical how everything will start to make sense. You're like, oh, yeah. And then, with that though, that level of awareness is that there can be such a rapid integration of like, and by integration I mean there's this rapid adoption within your body, within your whole self, of like, oh, I see how I did it the way that's not correct for me, and now I know the correct way. And you just start doing it, like blinking or breathing. It just starts happening really smoothly. You don't have to think about it. And that's where, I don't know if I've ever put it that way on the podcast before, but like I think that's why I like human design so much. It's like, as you start to live and breathe it, you live and breathe it.
Yeah.
And then it really does take such a heaviness off your shoulders, and gives you this freedom and expansion to just go out and do the thing. Because you are so solid in yourself. You are so solid in your power. You feel so worthy in yourself. Whatever emotions come up, it's like, yeah, you just ride them. You can have a sadness day, you can have a happiness day, you can have whatever circumstance get thrown at you, and you're still solid. And then everything that you manifest from there just becomes more and more and more.
Totally, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, I've just unlocked another one of those like mysteries of my life. Like, I'm so happy we did this podcast today, because it's like, yeah, it's like this whole weight has been lifted off my shoulders, because now I can see something that I couldn't see before. And, again, life is just a series of like unlocking those inner soul codes. It's what we talked about in the activation. It's what we teach in the playground. It's what we master with our clients in one-to-one. It's understanding your own energy. And it's, to me, the biggest, I guess, the most freeing thing about the work that we do. It's that, it's not one size fits all. What works for me does not work for you. And I'm not even going to say that it's like, oh, because I'm older and I've gone through more, like that's bullshit. Like, honestly, I feel like you can meet anybody where they're at in the moment if you can meet yourself anywhere in the moment, and when we talk about manifesting, when we talk about building businesses, yeah, you're constantly manifesting, but it's that frequency underneath that's the most important piece. And the frequency underneath, like, again, I had that frequency of I'm broken, I will never be fixed. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm half put back together, so this is going to work. And then like, now it's like, so what? Like, I am who I am. The experience I've had, and human design has been that. It's almost like, I know we talk about it, and AC Brown uses this term, and I really want to make sure that she gets credit for it, but like the IKEA blueprint, right? Like it's your IKEA instructions to your energy. But in some ways for me, human design has been more like the thread that stitched me back together, because it was like taking all these different pieces of myself that I didn't understand and finally like fixing the tapestry that is me, right? You could tell I went to art school for textiles. It's like that thread that was like that missing piece that I just didn't quite understand why things were always, my boxes had boxes. That makes sense to me now, because I didn't have that energetic knowing that was tying it together. And do I think I'm perfect? Fuck no. Do I ever think I'm going to be perfect? No. I do have that perfectionism, but like, again,
You know what though?
that's part
But
of
like,
it.
okay, so the whole perfection thing, someone asked this, I think it was in the last round of the playground, someone asked this question, and it was like, I just don't like, it was a question about like holding yourself back or like sort of waiting to, work on something more in their business before releasing it. And, it's like, I mean, the gate of the perfection gate 58 is actually the gate of joy. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, think about that. Like, you don't need to show up and be perfect. You need to show up and be the best version you can be right now. And then the version that shows up next week will be better. And the next week will be better and better and better and better. And it doesn't, there's no gold medal for like how far you stretch yourself from one week to the next. It's like if you're 1% better, you're 1% better. And, but I think like there's evolution in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting better and better. There's no cap on that. You can keep getting better. Perfect can't get better.
No.
Perfect is just like a stagnant state. And if you are only doing things in your business to be perfect, then you're never going to stretch yourself, because if you think of doing something different and you're like, well, I'm not going to go the full 9 yards because I might not, it might get messy. So I'm gonna I'm gonna rein it in a little into the safe zone of where I know I can make it perfect. So then your business, even if your business does grow, it will grow in a very stagnated way, because you're never going to stretch that little bit more where it might get a bit messy, even if it could be better.
Well said, Laura Milne. Well said. So if you're curious on your own human design, great news. There's a wait list for the playground. It is coming back. We will drop the link in the show notes below, or you can go to www.luscioushustle.com/playground and get yourself on the wait list. But also, if you're really ready to deep dive right now and you're curious about your energetics, we do star strategy sessions, which is a 60-minute deep dive into your chart. Again, go to www.luscioushustle.com for all the information and to sign up there, or hit us up on Instagram at luscious.hustle, and we can send you a link so you can book a star strategy session. But really, coming full circle back to the beginning of this episode, I mean, we got on here to talk about manifestation and all the different ways that it can express itself. And I think, even though we meandered in this conversation, and I mean, we've taken a lot of twists and turns, it all ties together, because it is about, I mean, Laura takes more risks now than I think she ever has before in our business, and it's exciting to watch. But I also know how uncomfortable it sometimes makes you. Like, you're like, let me think on this. I'm like,
it does make me
yes?
uncomfortable, but I also think like I'm getting used to the uncomfortable,
Exactly.
and that's a good thing. Like,
yes.
if you're going to get used to anything, get used to being uncomfortable. That's the healthiest thing you could ever get used to.
Yes. Whereas as a 3-5 profile, I have been used to the uncomfortable for a much longer time. And maybe that is, I mean, I don't have the answer to that. Maybe that is why I'm more like risk oriented.
Well,
right?
I have a 1 line, right? The 5-1, and I have other things in my chart that are 1 line, foundational. And so when you have anything that's like a 1, it is a lot about safety.
Mm-hmm.
It is about having that foundation. So you can be big and bold, but you still have to define for yourself what that sense of safety is. And if you're in a period of your life where the foundation gets shooken, that's not correct.
All shook up.
All shook up. There we go.
As Elvis would say.
Yeah, like you have to redefine that for yourself in order to step to the next paradigm.
Yeah. So again, head on over to luscioushustle.com.
Thanks for a star strategy session together.
What's that?
All fun things for a star strategy session together.
Yes. So if you're interested in deep diving into your chart, again, head on over to www.luscioushustle.com, hit on the star strategy session link, or hit us up on Instagram at luscious.hustle. We can send you the link.
Hey, Luscious Hustler. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. We are over the moon grateful that you joined our conversation. If you can take 2 minutes to share this episode with a fellow entrepreneur or side hustler, it will not only have a massive positive impact on their life, but it will also signal to the universe that you are ready to take inspired action.
Then head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Let us know what you enjoy and what you would like to hear more of. It will support us on our mission to empower women to build the businesses of their dreams. Until next time, Luscious Hustler.